and welcome to my channel. Hi, I'm Wendy J. Haney, and today I'm going to show you how to take a jelly roll and turn it into rectangles that you can use to make some different designs. Tomorrow, well, if you're watching this on the day it came out, September 15th, then tomorrow, September 16th, is National Jelly Roll Day. So I thought I would put together this video to give you something to do with a jelly roll. If you're like me, I have a tendency to kind of collect them and then I don't do anything with them sometimes. So here you go. Here is something you can do with them. What you're gonna end up with is a whole bunch of rectangles. And those rectangles will be at different angles once you get them all cut up. Then you could do something like this, where you alternate angles, 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 and put together kind of a chevron style quilt. It looks kind of cool, and depending on your points, yeah, you can do that. That is one way I've seen it done, but guess what I figured out? Whoops! There are other ways you can play with those 4.5 by 8.5 inch rectangles. So in this one, I put two 4.5 by 8.5 inch rectangles together, opposite angles, and then tacked one at the bottom of it. And then I did another set and I shifted it and put one at the bottom here. I really think there is such a variety of ways that you can use these rectangles and put them together in a way that is enjoyable and pleasing to you. What I would recommend you do, though, is once you get everything cut out and you've got your pile of rectangles, that you actually find a place where you can lay them out and play with them so that you can see how the colors mix and see what you want to do with it. That is why I did not sew together the original layout I had, because I'm not quite sure how I want these laid out, and I didn't want to be ripping out seams in two different blocks. Hopefully I'll have something put together by the time before this video goes to, what do they call the news? Goes to post, goes to, yeah, whatever. Such that I can show you what I ended up with. If not, I'll tack on another video later and show you what I did with these rectangles. So go ahead, go find a jelly roll that you like and come along for the ride and then figure out what you can do with these wonderful rectangles. Okay, let's do this. I am working with a jelly roll from Betterex. It's the Rainbow Collection Triple Die Ballies, and I have 42 strips here. I'm going to go with a lap quilt size, so I'm going to end up using 40 of the strips. So the first thing we're going to do is, I'm thinking this would be a really pretty baby quilt. So actually I might end up not going a full laps quilt. That's what's really cool with this. You can kind of go with it and figure out what size you want, well, after the fact, sort of, depending on how many blocks you've got. Okay, what do we got here? So normally we kind of separate things out, lights and darks. I'm not gonna have you watch me do this. The cool thing with this way of doing it and this pattern that I'm working with that I think would be cool is, the one thing I like it is we don't have to match seams with anything for the most part, and you can go however you want. It's not something that is so structured you need to have your lights and your darks, and it's very much random. So what we want to do is, I'm going to just show you to start with. We're going to take 20 strips. So I will probably separate these out into two different piles because it looks like we have four colors, 4 strips of the same color. So I'm going to put 2 in each of my piles. And your jelly roll could be very, very different. That's the one thing I found is every jelly roll is different as far as how they're giving you your fabric. So I'm guessing this is a, okay. So given the way it was rolled up, I'm assuming it's 20 of each. What you're gonna do is you're gonna take your strips and you're gonna lay them out however you want. That's why this is so cool. You can do, well, fiddlesticks. Okay. You can lay them out however you want. So I would suggest you get a big table, get a floor without a dog or a cat that's going to be stirring them up, and lay out what you'd like. I'm jumping back into the middle of this first part of my video after I've already finished everything, because this is what happens when I do a recording of the first time I'm doing something. What I indicated initially was for you to take half of your jelly roll and sew it all together. So you're gonna have 20 strips all sewn together. Don't do that. 20 strips from your jelly roll at one time, just too cumbersome, too awful when it comes down to the subsequent steps that we're gonna have as far as trimming them up, subcutting it. It's just not manageable. So I would suggest you not have more than, say, 10 or 12. So to me, it's logical to just cut it in half and have sets of 10. So you'll have a set of 10 for each set of 20 that you've got. And that will make things so much easier as you progress forward with this than trying to have this big, massive set of 20 strips sewn together. What you're gonna do is you're gonna need 20 strips. You're gonna stagger them as you lay them out. Whoops, I am off my camera. You're going to stagger them 2 inches. So get a little ruler, a tiny ruler, and, you know, okay, 2 inches, and we're gonna put the next one, 2 inches. I would suggest you mark them. Right now I have these folded up, but you won't when you're doing this. Press them first. That's the other thing. Press your jelly roll. Get them pressed and then mark your 2 inches. Then lay them out how you like them. 20 strips offset by 2 inches. Then we're going to come back and you're going to sew each of these together. So you're going to sew that and this. And what I would highly suggest you do when sewing strips, instead of sewing them all top down, so the whole set of 20 is sewn from the top down, rotate. Kind of sew the top down. In fact, what I would do is, I'm gonna be honest with you, I'm doing this right along with you. I would suggest maybe you sew them in sets of 2. So these top down, and then whatever you have, well, this would be pretty next to that. This one, so that set, and then you can come back and offset them and sew the opposite direction. It helps, keeps your seams straighter when you're doing that, when you're doing a lot of piecing with strips. I'm gonna go and lay out my 20 strips, and I'm gonna take a picture of it so I can show you, because this table and this camera is not gonna be big enough to allow you to see my 20 strips. You can be as structured or unstructured as you want. This is another quilt. You may not be using a jelly roll. You can use you can only use scraps if you've got a lot of long leftover strips from binding, or you're using fabric and you choose to cut your own strips. But that's why this is so cool with jelly rolls. It just makes it super easy. I'm gonna go lay out. You go lay out yours, make it pretty, get what you want. You want 2 sets of 20. So the first set is going to be like this. Offset your 2 inches this way. Your next set is going to be offset the opposite direction. So this way, 2 inches in. Okay, you got this. I'm gonna go get this and try not to be too anal about it because I have a tendency to do that when I'm doing this stuff. And then I'll come back and yeah, we'll move forward. Well, it took me a little bit to get my colors organized and how I would lay them out so I was happy with it. Luckily, I have a big table and I was able to do that. I suggest that once you get them laid out the way you like, get your phone out and take a photo of them. Because even when I thought I was really careful and picked them up from that table and brought them over to here to pin and to press, what order did they go in? Yeah. So what I did was laid them out on a table, the order that I wanted them, so I was comfortable with the colors, and then I picked up 2 pieces at a time with the bottom one and then the next one up. I took them to the ironing board and I pressed them at the same time, and then I've got this handy little ruler that I got from the quiltingclub.com. It's a 2.5 inch square, but on the ironing board I just laid it on there to mark my 2 inches. I put my other fabric on top of it and I pinned and I was ready to go. I did about 6 pairs here and just chain pieced them all the way down. I do pin. Then once I have these done, I thought, okay, let's come back and show you how to then put your pairs together. Once again, refer back to that photo and make sure you have them laid out the way you want. And in this regards, because I stitched top to bottom on all of these, I usually find it really helps to not get my strips curvy if the next time I sew from this end, that end, the opposite end and down. So what I would do is I would take this, and actually before I go there, as I was working with this, I found it was easier to press my strips before I sewed them together the next time. And with this method, it's kind of rare in quilting that we're recommended to do this, but because of how we're going to put strips together, the seams could get bulky if they're all pressed the same way. So it's recommended that in this case, we press the seams open. And I have this handy dandy pressing stick that I got at a quilt retreat when they had a mystery quilt and this came with it. And I'll admit, really wouldn't have thought of getting one because it's not often you press open. It's handy and has come in handy. I'll put a link below on one that you can find on Amazon if you can't find it at your local store. It's just a curved pressing stick and you lay your strip over it. And the trickiest thing for me was to get the starting seam open. You put it on there and you get your seam open and then you get your iron and press. And normally I would have it the opposite direction because I'm pressing right to left. And just open that out and press it, and it's curved and it really gets that seam pressed open well. Okay, let's see if we can put this back so I remember where it's at. Okay, so you might find that helpful. So what I'm going to do here is, get my little 2-inch marker, however you're doing that, and I lay my other fabric on top of it, ensuring I've got my direction and my colors right. In this case, I pin this end, and then I stretch it all the way out, and I'm not pinning right now. I'm stretching it out until I get to the bottom And this does not need to be exact as far as that 2-inch. So now I'm at the bottom and I'm pinning it. Then I'm flipping it over and pinning it the right direction so my pins are on top. And then I go ahead and pin the whole thing. Because this way, when I go to the sewing machine, I know I always sew where my pins are on the top, and I sew this way. So this way, I am going to be sewing the opposite direction of when I sewed the first 2 pairs together. So this will have been sewn this way, this gets sewn that way, that's that way, and they're rotating. It just works better and gets you straighter strips, and they don't end up curvy. Okay, there you go. Now you know how to do that. I am going to go get my entire set done of all of them. It's a great project for chain piecing, and then I'll come back and show you how to cut these up. Before we jump into the cutting and subcutting your strips of fabric that you just put together, I want to go over the second set of strips you need. So the first ones we did rows where this, and the next one was 2-inch inset, and so on, all the way up. And I had 20 strips that I used, and now I've got 20 more strips in my package of 40 in my jelly roll. This time we're going to do the opposite. Instead of shifting to the right, we're going to shift to the left. So each one you put on top of the other is going to be 2 inches shifted to the left. 2 inches shifted to the left. So it's just a shift in which direction. And I know you're thinking, well, what the heck? If you look at your first piece, you're going, well, it's offset on the other end, so can't I just do the same thing and have it and flip it around? Well, not necessarily. I had one strip in my jelly roll that was actually like too short. It was weird. It came to an exact match with the, so I offset it this way, but when I got clear to the end, they matched. So I got shorted on that strip. This way, you make sure you're good, and then when we come to subcut, you shouldn't run into any problems. So go ahead and get those done. I have to go figure out what order I want my fabrics and see if I can switch things up a bit so they don't look exactly like my other one. On the other hand, if they do, they do. It's going to be what it is, especially the way we're going to subcut and put together later. Get to it. This is the perfect project for throwing on some music or a good audiobook, because all you're doing is sewing strips together and pressing. And the pressing, I have to admit, pressing the seams open is a bit putsy and takes longer, but I think you'll appreciate it in the end. Another important thing is, if you notice, my jelly rolls are pinky sheared on the ends. They're zigzagged instead of straight. When you're working with jelly rolls that are cut like that, your 1/4-inch seam starts on the outside edge, not on the inside. So be aware of that. And in this case, you're pretty good, because we're not going to be matching a lot of seams. I now have all my strips sewn together, including the set that is, well, angled to the left, where we're doing 2 inches out. As I mentioned earlier, I determined that doing 20 strips of jelly rolls all in one was not going to be a very good idea when it comes to needing to subcut them and trimming off the edge. I started that way and then went, oh my gosh, this is just way too large to manage. So I highly recommend that you keep your number of strips manageable. I went and took the seam ripper to the 20 strips that I had together already and divided them into 10, a set of 10. So like right now, I have a left angled set, I have 2 pieces, 10 of each, and I did the same with the set of fabrics that were right angled. Now, what we're gonna do, and you're gonna see why, I'm telling you, trying to manage 20 strips is pretty stinking painful. Let's see if I can get this all in the camera. Not quite, is what it is. What you're going to do now is want to make sure you get this pressed. One thing I did also was I used spray starch best press when I was pressing my my strips before I sewed them together. You might want to do another final press and put some starch on it again. Because what we're going to do now, is I'm going to move that little pin, is we want to take a ruler, and this one, my normal one, is not quite big enough. I'm lucky I have this wonderful 36.5-inch ruler, and what we're going to do is we want to trim this at an angle and trim off all these points. So you just need to kind of maneuver it a little and optimize where making sure and it's not going to be even, because like I said, when we put these on, we weren't exact. This looks pretty good. This looks pretty good. So now once you get that, there we go. We trim off the points, okay? Now we have that done. Then we're going to take this and we're going to subcut it. And you want to be careful because you're dealing with a bias edge now. You're going to take this, and I usually flip it around. I like to be cutting kind of on the top of the ruler. We're going to subcut this into 3 8.5-inch segments. I like to have a full ruler on the bottom that's showing me a nice even line of where I cut it. If you're lucky, you have a long 8.5-inch wide ruler. I do not, but I have a 6-inch ruler and a 2.5-inch ruler. This gives me my 8.5 inches that I need for my subcutting. So I've got my 2.5-inch all the way along my edge, and then I'm going to put my, whoops, you're going to want to keep an eye on that, and then I'm going to put my 6-inch on top of it. And I will take a picture of this so you can see what I'm doing. You're going to want it, so over here, you're going to want it so it covers all of your fabric. You can't see it on my screen, but my other end does not go the full length of my strip. Luckily, I have another handy dandy 6-inch wide ruler that's shorter that I'm going to just tap on the end of it. Therefore, I can then take my cutter. I will take a picture, so I'm not going to cut this now. I'm going to just cut there, and then I've got my strip. And I'm going to do that 3 times. I have found that sometimes I need to straighten up my bias edge there. Then, what that means is you're going to end up with, here's my other strip. You're going to end up with strips like this. Yep. They're angled on both ends. I have a 12.5-inch ruler. So you're going to take a 12.5-inch ruler or thereabouts. It does not need to be exact. And line it up on one edge and cut it off. Yep. Then you're going to take it and move it down to the other end and put it over here. Now, when you attach it on this end, you do not want to match up both ends. It's going to be slightly off, so it's going to be about 1/4 inch. Sometimes the easiest thing to do is, this actually had a seam, so I can tell where the 1/4 inch is. Your 1/4 inch is going to match right on the corner there and up up there, it'll be about 1/4 inch down. And so I'll have a picture showing here. Do that, and then you're gonna sew this together. And that will give you, do I have one? This one I've already messed with. It's gonna give you a rectangle. Yep, so here's where I sewed that on. It's actually gonna be bigger because it's gonna give you a rectangle. And then what you're gonna do is you're gonna subcut this rectangle into 4.5 by 8.5 inch strips. Yep. So there you go. You have a lot of subcutting to do. But as long as you keep those strips to about 10 or so, that's much more manageable to do your subcutting then. Get those all divided and subcutted, subcutted, and then we'll come back and show you what we're gonna do with these wonderful 4.5 by 8.5 inch rectangles. Now that you have all your rectangles and maybe you've already subcut them, I want to point out a few things also as I was subcutting mine. One, you do have quite a bit left at the end after you subcut your 3 rows of your jelly roll strips. So if you need to even up your bias edge once in a while, if you feel maybe it's stretched a little and you need to I don't want to say square it up because it's not square, but straighten it up. You have plenty of room to do that and not have fear that you won't have room to get in your 3.5 or your 3 subcuts of 8.5 inches. Also, sometimes I found when I put my so I chopped 12.5 inches off and I put it over on this end and sewed it on. It's like, oh, well, this end matches. This end's kind of wonky and is not right. Usually I find that that just means things got maybe a little stretched on the angle, and most of the time, not always, I do have a few that I'm like, what the heck happened? I can put the ruler on it and get the ruler at 8.5 inches here and find out that, okay, I think it's just a matter of trimming it. And this is pretty close there, but it levels out over here to 8.5 inches. So I'm just going to trim off that. There we go. And now it's closer to 8.5 all the way across. Then, when I'm subcutting my 4.5 inches, yes, let's do 4.5 and not 4.25. Sometimes, as you're moving across here, you may find that, oh, wow, okay, maybe this is a little wonky. It needs to be adjusted a little. So what I do is just move my ruler over 1/8 of an inch or so, straighten it here, make sure I'm straight at the top and the bottom, cut it, flip it over, and then square up, so to speak, straighten up that other edge that didn't seem so straight before. And then go ahead and finish subcutting your 4.5 inch. Once you get to the end, I've had, depending on if I had to trim up or not, I end up with a little bit more. So there's room for maneuverability in there also as you trim up. So there you have it. Now you're going to have a whole pile of 4.5 by 8.5 inch rectangles. You're going to want to put them into 2 piles. the ones where the angle's going this way and the ones going the opposite direction. That goes in that pile. And then you can start playing with them, putting them opposite of each other. Okay. So we can just go down. And what I found, depending on the order I piled them up, sometimes a lot of them are the same sets of colors. It's like, oh, I'm getting a turquoise and a turquoise. No, I don't want that. So find something else in the pile that doesn't match it. And then come down here, and this one, oh, see? That's green and green. No, I don't want that. So, or flip it. There we go. That'll work. And let's see, I want the opposite of what's going on up here. So as you can see, we're making chevrons. Nope, I don't want it that way. There we go. And now I need this way here. Oh, way too much red. Way too much red in there. Oh, let's try this one. There we go. So as you can see, you can then create a quilt with these chevrons like this, and you're not, there it looks like I'm matching seams. And if you think it's too close and it looks like you're matching, then don't. Grab another block where your seams aren't so close. And this also explains why we pressed our seams open. There you have it. You can do lots of things with this. I'm also thinking that I might want to play with, what if I put these together in blocks? So sewed those two together, but then sewed that one below it. And then I could do something down here, those two together, and that one above it. So it's, well, it won't actually be a square, but it's more dynamic, more movement in there. Just a thought as I was putting together and see in different ways we could put it together. I will try and put together examples of some different layouts, but otherwise, go for it. Play with these blocks and see what you can do with it. Hopefully before this video goes on YouTube, I will actually have had time to lay something out fully and decide what I'm going to do with it, and maybe even have it sewed together. I'm hoping I have enough for 2 baby quilts, because these colors might be really fun for a baby quilt. There you have it. I'll add on to this video before the end if I find something. Otherwise, I'll create another video later and tag it on the end of this one. Take care, and thank you so much for watching.